1815. Apparently the ancients have a lot of spare time on their hands right now. Those that have hands, at any rate. In fact, I have no idea if Theorazon or Perionon have hands at all. One ancient decides to reach out and throw threats, talking about how they were going to melt me into a puddle of goop, but then another two of the ancients stepped in to make them back down. Then another one reaches out, right on the heels, just to say hi. I mean, Perionon had more to say than that. The main reason they called was to thank me for returning their home stratum back to its original state. Well, getting the process going, at any rate. Very polite, very nice thing to say, not really all that similar to my previous conversations with ancients. After talking with Granon, I know that Perionon is some sort of horrific blood creature, which didn't give me the best impression, but after speaking with them, they're my favorite ancient by far. Our conversation was extremely brief. I don't think they can reach out to this stratum with the ease that Theorazon can, but maybe that'll change in the future. Certainly, more influence from the blood monster and less from the diseased corruption crab, starfish thing would be an improvement, putting it mildly. I'm back amongst that corruption now, making my way back up the tunnels. After being free of this cursed energy for a brief spell, being back amongst it is making me feel even more ill-disposed towards the ancient responsible for making it this way. I'm glad I gave them a piece of my mind while I had the chance. Sheesh, these tunnels are even worse than they were before. It's almost like they're reacting to Theorazon's anger. Well, I'm able to get through in the end and make my way back to the tunnel teams. You managed to find the sixth, eldest. The leader of the first team I encounter asks as I make it back inside the dig site. Looking up, holy moly, but they've achieved a heck of a lot in a short amount of time. The ant build teams are really getting out of control with their special evolutions, mutations and improving skills. Besides their high levels of specialization, there are a ton of them, over 2,000 working in this shaft alone. Thankfully, the entire thing is still filled with blessed cleansed mana, keeping them all safe and ridding me of that irritating acidic burn once and for all. Of course I did, I declare, indignant. You thought I wouldn't. I haven't been slacking like those lazy siblings up in the nest. I've been working hard. They have been slacking up there, the Carver agrees with a huff. Let them know what we think when you get back up there. Support the author by searching for the original publication of this novel. I will. Let me tell you about the tunnel layout below, then I'll be on my way. Can you pass the word to the other tunnels? Come here for a sec. You describe it and I'll manipulate this model. Every dig site has one and they mirror each other, so whatever changes I make here will be replicated to the others. It takes me 10 minutes to explain the basic shape of the dungeon below us and ensure what they have lines up with my tunnel map. Once I'm done, the dig team leaders gather to plot and plan, working out the best way to reach their target. There isn't long until this entire shaft is going to be filled with an unbelievable volume of mucus, so they need to get the digging done as fast as they possibly can. That haste can't let them compromise on safety, though, and they are at great pains to make sure the path they choose is as low risk as they can make it. Every time they intersect with an existing tunnel, the colony has to expend a huge volume of cleansed mana to flush out the contagion and secure the site for work, so they prefer to avoid it when they can. I leave them to their work, since I have nothing much to contribute, and use a gravity well to lift myself up the shaft towards the fortress. It isn't a straight path, there are inevitable turns and angles they had to make on the way down, but they managed to keep them to a minimum. Making sure the work was as simple as possible in order to keep it moving quickly was the name of the game. Interestingly, there is an absurd amount of work being done almost all the way up the tunnel by even more teams of ants, reinforcing the walls, making sure they won't be compromised by the absurdly powerful mucus being flooded through. Well, they'll break eventually, making them invulnerable to the acidic effect is impossible, but they don't need to last forever, just long enough to clear room for us to attack the final strongholds of the Krath. Securing this territory for the colony is our focus after all. It doesn't matter if we can reach the sixth, so long as we have to go through Krathland to get there, our victory is incomplete. Other than that, there are offshoot tunnels and pumping systems already tapped into mucus sources and ready to go, the holding tanks filling up before my eyes. By the time I reach the top, I count no less than 24 branching pipe systems designed to hoover up the mucus and shift it into this main shaft. It's hard to believe they've been able to cobble all of this stuff together in such a short amount of time. As always, I'm left speechless by the incredible potential of my siblings. Pretty soon, they won't need me for anything, which is good. When I reach the top, I find Solent waiting for me. Just about ready to go, I think, I tell her. She clacks her mandibles with satisfaction. Then it's time to end the rule of the Krath in the 5th, she says coolly. This campaign has taken long enough. I'm ready to wrap it up. 1816. Most were entirely unaware of the monumental task that the carvers had accomplished with their construction work. Draining an ocean's worth of highly acidic, immeasurably toxic goop wasn't a simple matter. Anything that came into contact with the stuff was liable to break in a matter of minutes, and if it broke containment, then there was a very real risk of it flooding into areas the colony didn't want it to go, with no way to fix the problem once it had snowballed out of control. Pumps that didn't need to touch the material they were pumping, pipes and shafts that would be able to withstand the potent acid until the work was done, methods to contain the contamination and provide safeguards against it spreading into the fortress. All of it developed and implemented in a matter of days. Solent, for one, was perfectly aware of what the build teams had achieved, and she was extremely grateful and impressed. She stood atop a massive grating, looking down into one of the shafts, with Tungsten by her side. Beneath them, the steel was rattling slightly as the enormously powerful pumping mechanisms came online, sucking in the slime in their holding tanks and bringing it up to pressure within the feed pipes. The carver pointed and Solent followed the leg to see the first pipe begin to drip mucus from the outlet. Give it a second for the pressure to build up, Tungsten grumbled. I didn't say anything, Solent replied calmly. You were thinking that it wasn't working, the carver accused. I was thinking no such thing, came the reply. It didn't take long. A few seconds later, the drips of thick chunks of mucus became a steady, gurgling flow, rolling out of the opening and falling into the enormous void below. It's getting there, Tungsten said. I know it is, Solent replied. Half a minute later, that flow had upgraded to a roaring jet, flying 10 meters from the outlet into empty space before arcing downward and splattering into the wall of the tunnel. From there, it oozed and squelched before vanishing into the depths, out of sight. Further rumbling indicated that yet more of the pumping stations were coming online farther down, and soon there were multiple jets of mucus streaming into the vertical shaft. Once they were all operational, dozens and dozens of these outlet pipes would be moving millions and millions of liters an hour, and that was just for this one shaft. 3 others were also coming alive alongside this one. Already, a misty miasma in the form of a hazy yellow-green mist was rising up from below, but before it could hit the grating, it was blasted out of existence by a strong flow of cleansed mana, released from within the grating they stood atop. A case of content theft. This narrative is not rightfully on Amazon. If you spot it, report the violation. You've made a miracle happen here, you and your teams, Solent congratulated Tungsten. Well done, thanks. It was an interesting project, but I'd much rather have a wider timeframe for the next one. I should be able to manage that, Solent said, clacking her mandibles with satisfaction. It would take days before the lower tunnels were drained enough for the colony to make meaningful progress, but that was fine. It wasn't as if the Krath were in any sort of position to push back. They could advance leisurely for a change, expending their reserves of liquid mana in a tactical manner, rather than disgorging enormous volumes in a tidal wave and having it slosh down through the layers. Of course, executing such maneuvers would require delicate planning and flawless execution, for which she had a day, perhaps a day and a half, to arrange. You and your teams should take a well-deserved rest, Solent said. I'm certain we'll need you again soon when something unforeseen pops up. A few of us will stick around a while longer to correct anything that breaks. I thought you engineered this so that it wouldn't break. Tungsten snapped out a quick, sharp laugh, a single resounding crack of her mandibles accompanying the pheromones. With nothing else to say, the council member turned and headed back to confer with her teams, watching the pumping process from nearby and monitoring readouts on several arrays they had installed within the pipe network. So long as they were happy, Solent had nothing to complain about. She turned her back on the digging works and headed back into the fortress. Within the inner sanctum, her expert tacticians and strategists were already hard at work, poring over the still developing maps and models of the lower tunnels while arguing with each other over the best path forward. Where were we? She asked as she settled into her seat, generals gathering around her along with her own trusted broodmates. It's difficult to develop a comprehensive strategy, Csant reported, since we don't have a complete picture of the terrain. What we think might be a key tunnel junction might lead nowhere at all. We will have to play it by ear, as the humans say, Solent said, her antennae swaying gently as she sank deep into thought. When certainty can't be found, we must use likelihood as our guide. Play the percentages, as we would say in the tunnel ball days. We need to shift our priorities also. Rather than seizing locations that are most likely to be key defensive positions as we normally would, we must prioritize those that will give us the most information. She leaned forward and tapped the model in front of her. This junction here is a perfect example. 5 branches, wide open, difficult to maintain our hold over it if things were to go poorly, high chances of getting flanked. Normally, I would recommend we avoid this location as much as possible. For this mission, it is of the highest priority. From here we have the highest chance to gain more information and expand our maps the furthest. In the uncertain battlefield, knowledge becomes 10 times as valuable. I see, Csan said thoughtfully. I will report to the others. We will develop our plan of attack along these guidelines. We should have the first stage ready in a few hours. Excellent, Solent said, nodding in satisfaction. As long as we move quickly enough, the craft won't be able to escape us. 1817. Solent looked down into the tunnel below and struggled to conceal her disgust. Normally, she had no problem maintaining her disposition, even when confronted with the worst the fifth had to offer, but these lungs, as the eldest described them, were foul beyond description. Pulsating, oozing, clotted and rotting, somehow all at the same time, they were also absolutely clogged with a thick layer of mucus that only seemed to grow and drip down into the lower passages with every passing second. As promised, the density and velocity of mana through these passages was absolutely stunning, just as the eldest had reported. Well, that's quite something, Leonidant muttered to herself. What on Pangara am I looking at? You don't know. Well, I suppose I shouldn't be surprised, another voice chimed in brightly. Not everyone can be brilliant, after all. Leonidant snipped her mandibles in irritation at being addressed in this manner, but Solent soothed her with a twitch of one leg. Would you care to explain it for us? Solent said, turning to her fellow champion, the extremely intelligent but somewhat grating Brilliant. How does this work? Like lungs, Brilliant shrugged her antennae. The eldest described it perfectly. Solent took a moment to ensure she maintained her patience. The disgusting display below was rattling her more than she cared to admit. Or perhaps it wasn't so much the appearance of the tunnel but the sounds that emitted from it. So much squelching surely wasn't natural, even for the fifth. I do not have lungs, Solent pointed out, nor do I understand how they work. This is why I have asked you to come here, so that you might explain it to us. Brilliant tsked before she began to pace, her middle legs bent behind her back where her claws could clasp each other. It was such an odd thing to do that Solent found it difficult to focus on what she was actually saying. For the most part, living creatures require oxygen to live. This is true of humans, Golgari, Carmado and all other regular, living creatures on the surface. This was proven by the Magio scholars well over 800 years ago in an interesting experiment that analyzed. We are limited on time, Solent pointed out. There is always time for learning. No, there isn't, Brilliant huffed. Fine, well, they need oxygen. Good news, there is oxygen all over the place in the air. Bad news, they need it in their blood, which has to remain clean in order for them to, live. So they can't just throw blood around in the air, instead, they developed a neat solution involving mouths and all sorts of other bits and pieces. The main one being the lungs. Made of gooey, fleshy little sacs, much like that chamber just below us, they fill up with air when a breath is taken, and then the oxygen is slipped into the blood which flows through very small vessels in the walls of the sacs. This narrative has been purloined without the author's approval. Report any appearances on Amazon. Brilliant pointed downward. In this metaphor, the oxygen is mana and blood is mucus. Down there, huge amounts of toxic mana flood into the system of connected chambers and tunnels before being soaked into the walls, converted into a highly concentrated form, and shipped out by the vessels. We already know where that mana comes from. Multiple hearts are connected to this location, forcing that mana to circulate through here. The mad ant turned, clacking her mandibles derisively. It's a silly way to sustain life. Insects on the surface don't use blood but a system of air pipes to deliver oxygen throughout their bodies. No need for lungs or any other such silliness. Solent paused. Then why don't we have such a system? Last time I checked, we didn't need air to survive. Oh, well, Brilliant said, without access to the heart to help move the oxygen around, the insect system can't shift the oxygen all that far, so it doesn't really work in larger lifeforms. For an insect monster, like us, we rely on mana rather than oxygen to fuel our bodies, removing the size limitation. I was doing some calculations actually, trying to work out if we could become more mana efficient if we were able to introduce some sort of respiratory system during an evolution. Right now, the larger we get, the more mana we need just to sustain our bodies. It's a lot more than you think it is. So the eldest needs a boatload of mana just to move. Do they know that? I doubt it. Solent sighed. That was a problem for another time. She wondered if Brilliant was being deliberately unhelpful, but quickly dismissed the idea. Brilliant wouldn't miss an opportunity to make herself look clever. She simply didn't realize when she'd figured out something that nobody else in the colony had. This knowledge about the mana dependence of ant monsters might be nothing to her, but it could be massive to the development of the colony. She made a mental note to look into it in future. So what can you tell us about this mess below? It really was hideous. There's two ways to tackle the problem, Brilliant said, resuming her pacing with two legs clasped behind her back. You can either dump cleansed mana into the lung network, hoping that it will flush through the system and then export the new energy via the vessels. That could create a positive feedback loop where the cleansed mana filters into the hearts, fixes them and then flows back here to the lungs, completing the cycle. I presume there's a risk. There's always a risk. Not of explosions though, sadly. You could export clean mana, but it doesn't fix the hearts, just gets converted back to corrupted energy, and then filters into the lungs again, undoing the work you've done. Alternatively, you could attack the hearts, clean those out, and therefore provide the lungs with nice, healthy mana and hope that it will fix the system over time. Of course, the same risk applies except in reverse, Solent sighed. The lungs might corrupt that mana and then feed it back into the hearts, undoing our work. What's the solution? Well, Brilliant mused, the solution is rather simple when you think about it. If doing one isn't going to get the job done, then you have to do both. Clean the hearts and lungs, at the same time. Clean energy flowing into clean energy, the harmonious loop will be established no matter what. That's your solution, Solent said. We would need an unfathomable amount of liquid mana to achieve that result. These lungs are the most energy-dense part of the fifth we've ever found, and the system is huge. At the same time, we have to cleanse 4 hearts. That would take every drop of liquid mana you have stored in the entire 5th stratum, Brilliant said, smugly. You've calculated how much we have in storage. Exactly. Of course I have. I'm Brilliant. 1818. I thought I said I needed more time to rest. Actually, I think you said we should take more time to rest. That's right, Solent agreed, I did. Tungstan's antennae swung wildly as she tried to hold onto her temper. I think I also said that I would prefer a longer time frame on the next major project. That's right, Solent agreed once more, you did. And instead of doing that, Tungstan went on, as if she hadn't spoken, you gave me and my teams very little time to rest, and then brought us an even larger project, with an even shorter deadline. Am I smelling you correctly? You are, Solent nodded solemnly. It had been roughly a day since the pumps had been switched on, and in that time Solent and her troops had worked hard, capturing terrain, driving back the corruption and expanding the colony's reach into the lower tunnels as they became available. It had been difficult, dangerous work, battling monsters and corruption at a constantly moving frontline, across a dozen fronts at once. Had the Krath been active in the tunnels, she never would have attempted it, as they would certainly have succeeded in abducting an ant, with almost no chance of recovery. Although fraught with danger, they had been successful, driving the cleansed zone all the way down to what the eldest had described as the lungs. There, however, they had been forced to stop. Mucus still flooded the nearby tunnels, leaking out of the burst vessel the eldest had described, and so far the pumping stations hadn't been able to clear out the gunk fast enough to give them access and make repairs. They'd been able to move sideways, branching outwards and trying to gain direct access to the hearts, but so far, they had been stymied by the mucus and hadn't found what they'd needed. She was confident that the pumping system would eventually get the job done, it simply needed more time. Certainly, every ant-gyneer she'd spoken to had been confident that the pipes were holding up and would continue to function for the near future. Already they'd moved billions of liters of mucus, but they needed to move billions more before the colony could get where they needed to go. However, Brilliant had told Solent what was needed in order to win, and so Solent would now make sure that it happened. That meant the carvers had work to do. The mana channels have already been installed, we simply need a reservoir to hold the volume of energy that we need to complete the purification. Tungstan hung her head in despair. Oh, you, simply, need a reservoir capable of holding the entire supply of liquefied cleansed mana in the entire stratum. Is that all? Let me just snap my mandibles and produce one, it's so simple. If you discover this tale on Amazon, be aware that it has been stolen. Please report the violation. What are the challenges? Solent asked calmly. Whatever they are, I will ensure they are overcome. Tungsten seemed to lose all of the fight that had been bubbling up within her in a rush. She knew that this was going to happen. Solent would do exactly what she said. Whatever the build teams needed, whoever they needed, everything would appear in a timely manner, no matter how impossible it might have seemed at the outset. The ability to produce what was needed when it was required had been the little general's real superpower during this invasion. First of all, the channels are in place, that's true, but there is no way they can handle the kind of volume of transfer you're talking about in the short time you want it to happen. In fact, I doubt the current network could even handle the amount of liquid mana being generated across a day, let alone the entire reserve. How many times over does it need to be expanded? Solent asked, unflustered. 10 times, Tungsten guessed. That's an estimate, probably an overestimate, but it's better to be safe and go larger than fall short. Agreed, Solent nodded. The general paused for a moment, considering, then nodded. Very well, we will construct new mana channel systems aiming for 10 times the flow capacity leading to this fortress. I'll have the necessary materials in place by the time your teams are ready to begin work. Which was a truly staggering amount of highly engineered and delicate components. Mana channels were not simple to make by any standard. However, Tungsten knew that it would be done, just as the general had said. She would simply find a way to make it happen. Even so, she was baffled by the task ahead. I still don't see how it can be done, she said. We need to survey the ground, begin planning routes. There are careful calculations that need to be completed in order to ensure the channels won't fail or interact negatively with the tunnels they pass through. No time for that, Solent said. We will need to dig dedicated shafts for the new channels so we can control the environment and ensure their safety. We can't risk monsters chewing on our work and losing a single drop of mana. That's even more work you're asking for. There's a limit to how much we can get done, and I'm not sure you appreciate how much effort is required to dig out the kind of tunnels needed to host something as vulnerable as a mana channel. I simply don't have enough workers to get this done in time. Then you'll have more, Solent said. Tungsten stared. Almost every high-tier, high-level building and excavation specialist in the entire colony is here in the 5th already, Solent. There aren't any more to get. Solent appeared untroubled. You said it yourself, she said, the lower tier, lower level specialists are not here. They will be. Tungsten stared. You want to bring every construction team in the entire colony down to the 5th. Solent tilted her head to the side, as if slightly puzzled. You said that's what is required to win. Therefore, I will do it. Not for the first time, Tungsten wondered if Solent might be a little mad. It seemed every champion who came into contact with the eldest came out just a little crazy. Then how to explain merchant? In fact, there were many examples of ants who were somewhat strange that had never even met the eldest. Finally, Tungsten was forced to admit that perhaps, just a little bit, everyone in the colony was slightly crazy. She certainly was. She was starting to think this project might just be possible. 1819. How many carvers, mages, soldiers and other castes within the colony had dedicated themselves to the art of construction? At this point, nobody really knew the final number, but it was certainly the second most common specialty after combat. It was in their nature, Solent reflected, to want to dig and build. She herself hadn't had much opportunity to engage in the peace and satisfaction that every ant felt while digging through the soil and stone with her mandibles, but she had thoroughly enjoyed those few chances she'd had during her time in the Antacademy. Her own calling had lain in a different direction, but she truly understood those who had chosen to focus on this aspect of their inherent nature and respected them. Which is why she felt a real appreciation for the seemingly endless column of ants passing by her post, funneling into the elevator system that connected the 4th stratum to the 5th. I can't believe you've done this, Sloane muttered, baffled. Do you have any idea the chaos this is going to cause across the territory of the colony? You think we don't have other construction projects underway? I know we do, and I know they are important, Solent said, and I am certainly aware that this will cause damage and delays, weakening the colony in other places. I know all of this. She was totally unruffled, as always, but Sloane did get the sense that she had indeed thought about the chaos she had caused, thought about it in a great deal of depth, in fact. Solent had simply determined that this would be worth the cost. Turning back to the thousands and thousands of ants piling into the lifts every passing moment, many of them only tier 4, she couldn't help but worry. They will be perfectly safe, Solent assured her. They will never be placed anywhere near the corrupted areas of the 5th. The Krath won't have a chance to abduct any of them. But the cleansed areas are spawning monsters, are they not? Strong ones. Sloane was perfectly aware of the dangers these new monsters represented, as she had been involved in the various committees and groups dedicated to studying and combating the evolving threat. Evolving in the true sense of the word. Born at Tier 1, the native monsters of the 5th were still powerful by way of their inborn advantage of more potent native materials, punching well above their weight. Now that the colony's territory in the 5th had expanded to the point where they weren't able to properly police and patrol every tunnel and chamber that they controlled, the monsters had enough room to fight each other, mutate and evolve. Now they were regularly running into Tier 2, 3 and 4 versions of monsters that had only been Tier 1 a matter of weeks ago. And they were strong. If you come across this story on Amazon, be aware that it has been stolen from Novel Fire. Please report it. Even more concerning was the bizarre way some monsters in the 5th were able to team up with others of the same kind, bonding themselves together to create a new whole from many individuals. It wasn't much unlike the way the colony itself operated, creating something far greater by combining smaller, weaker components. It had been an ever-escalating challenge to deal with these new monsters and ensure that the enormous infrastructure investments that the colony had made in the 5th remained undamaged. All of the build sites are being cleared of monsters as we speak and will be regularly patrolled. I promise you they will be safe. Although it was reassuring on the surface level, this was concerning in another way. Are you saying you've pulled garrisons from the fortresses and border areas in the 5th? Are you insane? Sloane protested. I am not. I assure you that everything has been finely calculated and planned. Yes, troops have been pulled from the borders. Yes, this will increase the pressure and create dangers and risks. Yes, they are aware of the dangers and have been prepared to meet them. The two watched in silence for a time as the great migration of ants into the 5th continued, tens of thousands lowered down every few minutes. By the end of the day, over 1 million would have been added to the population of the 5th, all necessary to get the work done in time. Solent watched with silent satisfaction, certain that victory was finally right within reach of her mandibles. She had been patient for so long, now was the time to reap the rewards. Sloane watched with a sinking feeling in her thorax. Wasn't this exactly the sort of overreach the eldest had warned them against? She had a terrible feeling this was going to cause a great many issues down the line. And where was the eldest anyway? 1820. Truly, it can be said that there is no substitute for grub tickling. Fat and happy, spoiled by the immense love and tender care that they experience under the ever-watchful brood tenders, the way they wiggle and roll while being tickled fills me with joy in a way that nothing else can. An incomparable and irreplaceable experience that, sadly, simply isn't available down in the 5th. Quite sensibly, the colony has not moved any queens down to the 5th, judging that the risk of capture and general overall level of danger is simply unacceptable for the most important of all ants and the precious future generations of workers. So instead, I have come to the Snail Care Center to hang out with the chow. Be careful, eldest. The Resant scolds me for the 1000th time. I am literally not moving, I harumph. It isn't physically possible for me to be more careful. You could be outside of the room, she mutters. Would you stop fussing? The snails seem happy to see me. If they weren't, I wouldn't have let you in. Can you deal with your sister? I complain to Florence. This is supposed to be a relaxing and soothing experience, which it would be if not for her incessant hovering. Florence only shakes her head and clacks her mandibles sympathetically. I used all of my leverage up just getting you in there, eldest. I'm sorry, I can't do more. I swear, I'm a hair away from asking Protectant to save me from this pestering pest. Surely preserving my peace of mind counts as defending me from harm, right? Pushing the endlessly anxious tender out of my mind, I try to focus on the here and now. I meant what I'd said, this really is a nice and relaxing environment, even if they did have to remove a wall so I could fit inside. Pleasantly green, with real, natural, non-monstrous plants and a trickling little mini stream, the indoor space the snails inhabit is a verdant paradise. If I lay my head on the ground, it almost feels as though I'm a giant lording it over a miniature rainforest, most of the foliage not even making it up to the level of my eyes. As if the excessively pleasing environs weren't enough, there is a constant stream of the most beautiful song in the room. It's truly quite incredible to hear it up close and personal. From one corner of the room, hidden under the leafy vegetation, one chow will pipe up, contributing a few notes or perhaps a little melody. From another corner, this tiny piece of music will be taken up by one or perhaps multiple chow, each adding a little bit of their own color, a harmony, a counterpoint rhythm, or even adjusting the original melody, adding layers and complexity. This narrative has been unlawfully taken from Novel Fire. If you see it on Amazon, please report it. And then, as if they had all practiced and rehearsed it a few thousand times in advance, the room will break out into spontaneous, flawless and rich song, every snail contributing to an indescribable harmony that they came up with only a few moments before. Then, as suddenly as it began, it will fade away, the last soft notes hanging in the air to accompany the sudden pang of loss that strikes at my heart as I'm left with only a memory to cling to. After a few moments of silence, it all starts again with another snail, in a different corner, with a new song that they only just came up with. They really are born for it, these chow. I don't know, is this some sort of ancestral knowledge, preserved somewhere in the filthy sludge the crath count for blood? I know for a fact the colony has been working frantically to teach them the fundamental theories of music and technique and such, but I'm really not sure if they need it. I wonder if it's made any difference at all. These little snails are born songbirds. For the most part, they seem reasonably happy to see me. I've got chow up on my back, sliding about after using my legs as a ramp to get up there. It's giving the recent fits, but I really don't think they're likely to fall off. They're snails. Gripping onto things is a speciality of theirs. They're so small and light, I can't really feel them, but they appear to be having a good time. There's a lot of singing going on alongside an equal amount of what appears to be restful meditation. Is it as good as rolling and tickling grubs? No, but it's still quite nice. I'm being healed. However, I didn't only come here for the sake of rest and relaxation. The entire time I've been here in the Snail Care Center, I've been monitoring the activity of the pure core, which was specially modified via song magic in some bizarre fashion. Ever since I mutated it to deepen its connection to the chow, I've been turned into a mobile snail radio, beaming out healing music to all and sundry inside the dungeon. Interestingly, ever since I returned to the colony's territory, the song has stopped and the core has gone silent, making me think the song effect is powered by the purification process. Well, it's a guess. It turns out that being here, surrounded by the chow and experiencing their song directly, doesn't do anything to the pure core. I've been watching like a hawk, but there has been a big fat load of nothing going on. Alright then, I sigh, I better get up and get moving. I think I've lain here for long enough. You are getting up immediately, are you? The recent screeches with a truly shrill burst of pheromones. Are you mad? I prod her with an antenna. Man, I wish I could still dispense a solid thwack, but they've become far too lethal. No, obviously I'm not mad. I was going to wait until the snails got bored and worked their way off my back. Call them in for a meal or something. As it turns out though, the chow were quite happy to stay on my back, sliding about and singing. In the end I had to get the brood tenders to collect their mustachioed charges and move them a safe distance away. Only then was I able to back out of the Snail Care Center and watch as they rebuilt the wall behind me. Well, it was fun. There's probably something I should be doing right now though. 1821. The colony's strategy, when Solent explains it to me, is pretty straightforward. There are a total of 4 hearts surrounding the network of tunnels that I call the lungs of the 5th. And each of them needs to be tackled pretty much simultaneously, flooded with cleansed mana and the Krath tribes hiding inside rooted out completely. At the same time, we have to flood the lungs with cleansed mana, hopefully removing the contagion from the entire region in one fell swoop. Sounds good in theory, but the sheer quantity of energy required is posing some problems. Well, that's the sense I get when I see the size of the holding tank facility being constructed above the fortress. If the Krath knew this thing existed, they would burn half of the 5th down to destroy it, I bet. So much pure, concentrated woofer juice held in the one spot, the entire reserve of every fortress combined, so I'm told, destroying it would be a strategic victory so immense it would set the colony back months. Not only would the upcoming attack be completely foiled, the fortresses currently lack the ability to defend themselves with surges of cleansed energy, making them more vulnerable than they've been at any point since their construction. Solent is taking a massive gamble, looking to punch through to the 6th, prove to the world it can be done and secure passage for the colony in one fell swoop. It's the kind of calculated gamble a regular ant general would never take, but that Solent cannot resist. She knows the odds are on her side. After all, she has me. So, how am I going to hit all 4 hearts at the same time? I ask her. She looks at me. You aren't. As far as I'm aware, eldest, you can't be in 4 places at once. She hesitates. For a moment. Can you be in 4 places at once? I'm not sure the dungeon is prepared to handle that much, Anthony. No, I can't. Does that mean we do the attacks in sequence? One right after the other, so I have time to move between them? No, eldest. One heart will be assaulted by the immortals, supported by 4 battalions. Another will be hit with 10 battalions. Sarah and Odin have agreed to assist in that assault. Sarah and Odin, they're going in. That's really nice of them. Did you know this text is from a different site? Read the official version to support the creator. Yes, it is. We are very grateful for their help. The third heart will be assaulted by a further 10 battalions and, if you acquiesce, Tiny, Chrysalis and Nvidia. That's fine with me. I'm pretty sure they want something to do. Tiny is getting tired of flexing and posing. That's a lie, he never gets bored of flexing and posing. Even so, some action would be good for them. I know for a fact the 3 of them have been getting more and more angsty that they haven't reached tier 8 yet. It's not like they can go out and hunt for powerful monsters in the 5th, because they'd be melted by the mana and environment before getting the chance to find anything. This has left all 3, to varying degrees, frustrated that they're falling behind. I don't really expect them to be able to keep up or anything. I've had some rather fortunate evolutions after all, but I certainly don't want them to be unsafe. The stronger they are, the less I have to worry about them, so giving them the chance to smash some crath faces in is fine by me. Alright then, that leaves 1 heart left. Who's assaulting that one? You are, eldest. Oh, of course. Nice. Who's going in with me? Battalion or 2, Torpor Police. As yet unknown secret military force you've been developing in secret. Man, that last one would be exciting, but it's basically impossible for the colony to keep a secret from me. Vestibule and all that. Just you, eldest. I suppose the Templars may want to go also. They do seem to have a rather strong desire to protect and aid you. Yes, they do. I wonder if they've always had that, or if it's something that is forced on them by their class. The idea of emotional manipulation via system mechanics hasn't occurred to me before, but now that I think about it, I can't discount the possibility. I suppose the vestibule could be considered a form of emotional manipulation towards me, since all of that will certainly has an influence on my behavior. Just knowing what the colony wants and thinks changes my decisions. Well, I suppose it's fine if the older 3 want to tag along. There's no way I'm letting the kids attack a heart. That would be nuts. How do you intend to stop them? The non-ant members of the battalions hold them in high reverence and are unlikely to hold them against their will. I'll figure it out. I'll put the nameless on the job. They can babysit 3 young humans easily enough, surely. Do we have access to the hearts yet, or are we still pumping? Solent cleans her antennae as she replies, giving a satisfied click of the mandibles when the job is done to her satisfaction. We do not yet have access to all 4 hearts and pumping continues. Soon, we hope to be able to repair the arterial damage that was caused by unknown entities, and thus reduce the demand on the pumping stations. I really hope I haven't caused any problems to the 6th. An endless rain of mucus would certainly rile up the locals and create a terrible impression. Alright, I'll go round up the gang and Templars and get them moving. I assume this is going ahead soon. The moment the tunnels are clear. 1822. Tiny is, predictably, in the middle of an intense flexing session when I return to my closest friends, currently relaxing in a wide, spacious chamber within the fortress. With a look of intense concentration on his face, Tiny is slowly shifting from one pose to the next, flexing a different set of muscles with each until he's run through the entire set. At which point he, of course, goes back to start and runs through them all again. I don't understand how he became so obsessed with flexing in the first place. He doesn't have a mirror or anything. What's the purpose? What is gained through this exercise? I think, deep down, I actually know the answer to that. Tiny doesn't do this in order to impress others. No, his love of bulk isn't so superficial as that. Tiny likes to flex simply for his own satisfaction, to feel the power and size that he has developed for himself. I wish he gained even a fraction of that happiness from working his brain. Sadly, Tiny is completely satisfied having a sack full of bricks for brains. In fact, if he had the choice, he'd be down to a single brick wrapped in a lone, scraggly thread. How are we all, gang? Ready to break through to the 6th stratum? Of course, Master, Chrysalis says, somewhat sinisterly. She's mad that I made it to the next layer and didn't take her along. I am looking forward to seeing it for the first time. I'm sure you'll be bored of the 6th, so I hope you don't mind being dragged there again. I was there for no more than a few minutes and didn't see anything other than the inside of a cloud. Sheesh, we will go together and the first time I see anything interesting, you will be there right beside me. Chrysalis is not satisfied with this, just like she wasn't the first time she heard it. I can't tell if her clinginess is getting worse or if she's just maintaining a steady level of obsessiveness. At least she's not trying to sneak into my carapace. Oh wait, she is. I nudge a creeping tentacle to the side with a leg before I turn to Nvidia. How about you, Nvidia? Excited to explore new surroundings? Friends are always SSS there to support SSSS each other SSS, he says, eye flashing. I will go together with my friends SSSS. Stolen from novel Fire, this story should be reported if encountered on Amazon. That's very wholesome of you, Nvidia. I love to hear it. Somehow this demon always manages to bring a warm glow to my heart lately. He's just so friendly and reliable, exactly the kind of explosion-flinging wizard demon you want in your corner. Tiny, how are you feeling about it? He shrugs, then becomes distracted by his traps, turning his head to try and get a better view of his shoulders, but when he tries, his shoulder turns further away. Eventually he winds up spinning in a slow circle, growing more and more frustrated. You stupid, hey, Tiny. I clack my mandibles to catch his attention. There's lightning mana down there. Tons of it. Doesn't that sound exciting? Big ol' stormy stratum full of electricity. He does seem rather enthused at the prospect, his pointy bad ears perking up and twitching as interest is sparked in his eyes. Once we've smashed through some hearts and gotten rid of the craft, we are free to explore a bold new frontier. I enthuse. No more sitting around waiting for stuff to happen, doesn't that sound nice? I might be talking to myself more than them. After all this running around in the 5th and dealing with problems in the 4th, I've run out of patience for dealing with the nitty-gritty. Of course it's necessary, and I'll do anything that the colony needs me to do, but holy moly I'd love to do some free exploring around the 6th. With the pets geared up and ready to go on their mission, I head elsewhere to find the Templars and have a chat with them about what they may or may not want to do. I run into some unexpected resistance when dealing with the little ones. To me, they are so little, not even full-grown humans, and a full-grown human is quite a small thing at this point. No, you aren't allowed to come, I reiterate sternly. Allison, Amelia, and Trine don't throw a tantrum, or even argue. They just stare at me, judgmentally, as if disappointed in me. It stings. Look, it's too dangerous. You're young and small, and haven't evolved many times. We don't evolve, Great One, Jern says helpfully. Don't call me that. Right, well you still can't come. I look at them, and they stare back. Obviously they are still intending to come to the heart, no matter what I say. Determined and ready to fight, they don't want to be left behind, which is fair, to an extent. Get 'em, I yell. The shadows erupt into liquid, reaching and grasping, surrounding the 3 Templars. In return, they move faster than I've ever seen them move before, their figures melting into darkness before they dive into a shadow and try to make a break for it. What follows is a bizarre game of tag, with shadows chasing shadows all around the chamber, zipping about so rapidly that I can barely keep track of them, even with my compound eyes. Before I get too dizzy, the situation seems to resolve itself when the entire chamber shifts into a nightmarish realm of pure darkness, only to snap back less than a second later. At that point, all of the shadows are gone, along with the 3 young Templars. Well, good, I think. 1823. As it turns out, moving truly vast quantities of mana over a long distance is a rather complicated affair. Mana is, after all, energy, even in its liquid form, and it has a nasty habit of interacting with other mana even when you don't want it to. Every fortress controlled by the colony holds an enormous reserve of liquid mana, converted by the woofers and then condensed after being sucked in through the many intake pipes along the borders of the colony's territory. Shipping that energy to the front and using it to flood out new sections of dungeon was key to Solent's strategy, so the infrastructure was in place to facilitate that movement. At these volumes though, problems start to arise. Problems like spontaneous spawn point creation. Monsters always pop out of dense areas of mana, that's where we come from. Once upon a time, the queen was spawned in exactly that manner, born out of pure energy by some twist of dungeon luck in a section of tunnel with higher than normal mana concentration. Shifting a decent-sized lake's worth of concentrated mana creates a lot of movement in the nearby energy, creating ripples and whorls that disrupt the otherwise predictable flow. These eddies shift the concentration, causing some areas to thin out, while other areas get dense. Shockingly dense. Before you know it, pop, a new monster jumps out and starts chewing on the pipes. Which means a heck of a lot of dungeon is having to get patrolled. Thankfully there isn't that much risk and large groups of younger, weaker ants are able to handle the bulk of it. I myself have been put on patrol in the area where the mana is expected to be at its most concentrated and thus most dangerous, the reservoir. Just look at that. Brilliant sighs, her antennae quivering in excitement. Isn't it spectacular? I assume I'm looking at the same thing she is, and I have to say, it doesn't seem that impressive. It looks like a whole bunch of fancy tanks arranged in a grid. Some of which are starting to fill up with liquid mana. To be honest, it's a heck of a lot more impressive to my mana sense than it is to my eyeballs. I don't understand a fifth of the technical wizardry that went into making the holding tanks, but the way they managed to contain and separate the dense rich energy within, energy that blazes to my senses with extraordinary power, is seriously impressive. That's because you lack my imagination, Senior. Brilliant declares, snapping her mandibles vigorously. She uses a foreleg to grab onto one of mine and issues a wide sweeping gesture across the reservoir with the other. You see the mechanics and the mundane nature of the scene in front of us. The glass, the metal, the pleasing symmetry and the shiny liquid. What I see, is potential. The genuine version of this novel can be found on another site. Support the author by reading it there. Potential for what? All of this is going to be used for the assault. If you have other ideas, you should probably put them forward now. Potential, Brilliant says intensely, for one heck of an explosion. I mean, I'm tired. Brilliant, I say wearily, do I need to lock you away in Nvidia's mouth again? Just until you lose this explosive urge to detonate. This was your idea, remember? Bah, the little ant exclaims, clearly disappointed by my lack of vision. What would you even want to blow up? There's nothing around here in need of detonation that I'm aware of. Certainly not on the scale that this much energy could cause. That's not the point, Brilliant declares, throwing up her front legs in frustration. Don't you want to see what is possible? To test the limits of the imagination? To push the boundaries of the possible? To blow up millions of members of my own family? No, I don't. Brilliant sags down with a sigh, uncharacteristically dejected. You're taking all the fun out of this, Senior. Fun out of what? Did you actually think I would approve some sort of insane experiment with all of this liquid mana? Is that the case? Because if that's the case, I can see you spending some time in the mouth. My antennae twitch as I sense something nearby. Wait there, I say, still cross, I'll be back in a minute. I move fast enough that when the monster roars to life, tearing itself free of the chamber wall, my mandibles are right there to meet it. Sorry, monster, you were just unlucky. When I get back, Brilliant is shuffling rocks about between her two front legs, still looking dejected. Can I blow up something? She complains. Here, no, you have an entire lab, a series of labs at this point, all there for you to explode. Go back there and play if that's what you really want. In fact, why are you here anyway? They wanted me to monitor the influx of mana to make sure nothing went wrong, she mutters. Well, isn't that important? I did the calculations myself, she retorts, nothing is going to go wrong, which means I'm wasting my time. Then go back to your labs. They made them explosion-proof. Ah, is it possible to be addicted to explosions? If so, then that's what we have here, an addict, and she needs a fix. I can only sigh. Taking care of the champions is always such an effort. Thankfully, Vibrant is currently occupied racing all over the captured territory in the 5th, plugging all the gaps created by the concentration of resources down here. As long as she's busy and running fast, she's happy. I'll let you blow up something in the 6th, alright. Try to hold on for a while yet. Excellent, Brilliant says, jumping back up and looking more like her normal, bouncy self. Wait a second, did you just act miserable in order to trick me into agreeing to satisfy your idiotic need for detonations? I did, the little ant declares, quite pleased with herself. And do you know how I was able to come up with such an ingenious scheme? I wouldn't, I warn her. Because I'm, Bree, thwack, ouch, I warned you. 1824. Lightning crackled along the cells, each filled with swelling brood or biomass undergoing the transformation to sweet nectar. Tucked into a corner along the roof, nestled between natural folds in the stone, the hive location was well concealed, with only a narrow entrance on either end. A defensible enough location for now, but without much room for expansion. The queen was already on the lookout for another place in which to build a larger nest. Workers, the first of her children in this new stratum, moved amongst the cells, ensuring the developing brood were tended and fed, ensuring the transition from biomass to nourishing nectar was completed smoothly. There were other jobs for them as well. They were the ones responsible for construction now that they were old enough, using their own saliva and processed biomass to expand the hive. Since the queen no longer needed to tend to the nest as actively, she had more time for hunting. Despite heavily modifying the status of her children during her last evolution, the queen wasn't confident they were yet strong enough to compete in this new environment. Loyal and faithful, they yearned to fight for the hive, but she wouldn't allow them to, not yet. She needed to hunt for them more, bring back prey to give them levels and let them accumulate mutations. When they were more numerous and stronger, they would be able to take over the hunting duties, giving her more time in the nest, but for now, she spent far more time out of the nest than she did inside of it. Her children were growing increasingly annoying about it. "My queen," buzzed one of her firstborn, Elizabeth. "You should not leave the hive alone. Allow me to accompany you." Her pheromones were filled with anxious care for her mother, which was nice, but only served to catch the attention of her sisters, which wasn't. "Is the queen going out again?" Beatrice asked. "Alone? Absolutely not. I am not required to take you with me," the queen told her firmly. "You are too weak to leave the nest. Stay here and tend to the brood until I return." "I must protest and protest I shall," Queenbee declared. "I have reached the 3rd tier and my stinger is fully mutated. The monsters out there stand no chance against my mighty toxin." Irritated, the queen buzzed her wings in frustration, blowing back the much smaller workers. "The monsters out there would destroy you in an instant," she said, her pheromones flat and unamused. "None of you are leaving this hive until you reach the 4th tier. Now stop being pests, I have to hunt." Reading on Amazon or a pirate site. This novel is from Novel Fire. Support the author by reading it there. Boo, hiss, meanie. Paying no attention to her protesting children, the queen flew quickly out of the exit and out into the dungeon. Lightning and wind immediately buffeted her, but she absorbed the blows and moved with the air current, her legs tucked tightly underneath her carapace as she began to search for new prey. It had seemed like such a good idea at first. If her children were more intelligent, then they would be better able to navigate the difficult hunting conditions here, so much deeper in the dungeon than where the queen was born, and where her first hive failed. So, she made them smarter, modifying her egg-laying process heavily during her last evolution to create smarter, stronger, more adaptable workers. What she hadn't appreciated at the time was just how independently minded it would make them. In her first hive, the very thought that any of her children would ever second-guess a single thing that she had told them was absurd. Now it was a daily occurrence, which only compounded the second decision she had made. After all, they had pheromone glands already, from the moment they were born. Why not make it so they could communicate better? This would mean more cooperation, more efficient tending to the hive and hunting. So far it had only led to more coordinated protesting. Antennae blowing wildly in the strong winds, the queen was still able to detect a faint scent. It wasn't much, but it was something she had found before. Banking hard, she turned into the wind and let it blow her to the side, angling her massive body to ensure she moved in just the right way. Suddenly, her wings buzzed once more, louder than before, and she picked up speed. From somewhere nearby within the swirling cloud on her right came a surprised cry followed by powerful wing beats. Monsters in this area were growing to know and fear the droning sound of her wings, the queen had noticed, but this one was too slow. She may not be nearly as fast as they were once they picked up speed, but she could dart in and tackle them before they had a chance to flee, agile and quick thanks to the unique nature of her wings. With a loud crack, she smashed into the target, spraying feathers wide as she latched on, mandibles snapping. Talons slashed, beak stabbed and lightning crashed. The fight was on. When it was over, the queen struggled back to the nest. Injured and burdened by the crackling hawk she had defeated, it was a difficult flight, but failure was simply not an option. The hive had to flourish, no matter what. The queen returns. "Ah, she's injured. Prepare the medical nectar immediately." "I'm fine," the queen groused, finally coming to a rest, lowering the biomass down into the nest. She appeared grumpy, but on the inside couldn't help but feel warmed by the care of her children. "I wasn't able to keep it alive, I'm afraid." "I'm sorry. Don't you dare apologize," Elizabeth yelled, waving her forelegs in the air. "You have done everything for us and we are truly grateful. Here, 3 cheers for the queen." Well, maybe having noisy children wasn't too bad.